Before zippers, before purses with clasps, before women were even allowed pockets in their dresses, there were secrets stitched quietly beneath petticoats. Tonight, we're going to slowly unbutton the story of Victorian women's hidden fabric pockets. How they were sewn into silence, filled with little rebellions, and eventually vanished into fashion's forgetfulness. If you're tucked in and ready for a sleepy walk through soft fabric folds, quiet keys, and stories stitched into seams, let's begin. This is Boring History for Sleep. Chapter 1. The Petticoat Puzzle. How fashion concealed function. Long before handbags and designer clutches dangled from polished wrists, women carried their most important items sewn right into their clothes. Not in obvious places, but in curious, hidden compartments, deep within the folds of skirts and stitched discreetly under petticoats. This is not just a fashion oddity. It's a quiet tale of resourcefulness, modest rebellion, and the peculiar relationship between clothing and autonomy. Imagine yourself stepping into a London sitting room in the mid-18th century. The air smells faintly of coal smoke and lavender soap. The woman seated by the hearth is pulling a thread through a linen pocket, detached from any outer garment. She sews slowly and carefully. She's not making a statement, at least, not one that's loud. But what she's doing is quietly revolutionary. For centuries, men's clothing featured external pockets squared off, tailored, and conveniently accessible. Women's garments, by contrast, followed a very different trajectory. Dresses became increasingly elaborate and tightly fitted, often layered with petticoats and stays. With no exterior pockets available to them, women had to develop alternatives. Enter the tie-on pocket, a large flat pouch made of linen, cotton, or silk, worn around the waist and tied underneath the outer skirt. These were not small. Some could stretch nearly a foot wide and were often intricately embroidered, despite their concealment. Worn beneath layers of fabric, they were accessed through slits cut into the seams of petticoats or gowns. These slits were key. From the outside, there was no hint of what lay within. And that was precisely the point. Inside these secret pouches, women carried sewing kits, keys, small coins, handwritten notes, keepsakes, and even snacks. For many working women, it was the safest place to keep hard-earned wages. For others, it was a way to carry private tokens of affection or smuggled pamphlets, especially as political winds grew stormier in the 19th century. But why all the secrecy? The answer lies partly in fashion and partly in control. As the 18th century gave way to the 19th, women's silhouettes shifted. Full skirts and panniers gave way to the neoclassical lines of the Regency period fabrics, clung closer to the body, leaving less room for bulky pockets beneath. Designers began to integrate reticules, or small drawstring bags, which women could carry externally. These delicate accessories were dainty, decorative, and most importantly visible. To some, this shift marked progress. Finally, women could carry their own things openly, just like men. But others mourned the loss of privacy, and in a way, power, you see. The secret pocket had its advantages with a reticule. A woman's possessions could be seen, judged, and potentially stolen. With a hidden pocket, they were hers alone. She could keep things close to her body, protected by layers of fabric and propriety. No one could easily rifle through them without suspicion. In a world where women often had limited legal or financial independence, a well-hidden pocket could serve as a tiny stronghold of freedom. And so, even as fashions changed and handbags grew more common, many women kept their pockets in rural England and parts of France. Well into the 19th century, women continued to sew secret pockets into their petticoats. Some had more than one. Mothers passed down the tradition to daughters, along with tips for sewing the slit just right, easy to reach through, but hard to spot. They stitched in quiet rebellion, resisting both fashion trends and the growing surveillance of female bodies in public space. What did they carry, hidden in those linen depths? And what might those items tell us if we could unfold the past like fabric, layer by layer? Chapter 2. What Women Carried: Secrets, Survival, and Stitches. The idea of a hidden pocket might seem quaint today, perhaps even charming. But to truly understand its historical weight, you must step back into the lives of the women who used them. These pouches were not just useful, they were lifelines. What women chose to tuck inside them offers a quiet glimpse into lives lived within strict boundaries, and how they navigated the world with limited freedom. Let us begin with something practical. Keys. A working-class woman in 1800s Yorkshire might rise before dawn. Her fingers, calloused from years of laundering, would slip into the side slit of her petticoat to retrieve a brass key. This was no ordinary item. It might unlock the linen cupboard in a large household, or the till in a small shop she helped run with her husband. In some cases, it was the key to the back entrance, her own private access to the world. To carry keys was to carry authority. It was also a sign of trust, and occasionally, power. We mustn't overlook the role of coins. Even a few farthings tucked into the folds of muslin were meaningful. In a time when married women in many Western societies could not legally own property or open bank accounts, physical coins were independence in miniature. A woman might save up change for weeks to buy a ribbon, a candle, or a small gift. Some used pocket money to buy secret books or subscribe to early feminist pamphlets. Others simply used it to pay for tea and time small escapes with friends in the corner of a market square. Needles and thread were just as common. If you imagine a lady of leisure pulling out a gold thimble, you wouldn't be far off. Embroidery was a fashionable pastime, but sewing was also a survival skill. A torn hem, a loose button, or a ripped glove could be mended on the go. Women carried sewing kits as today someone might carry a phone charger, essential, comforting, and always at the ready. But then there were the personal things: pressed flowers, lockets with miniature portraits, letters folded and refolded, a handkerchief with a scent of perfume. These objects lived close to the body, in the literal and emotional sense. They were stitched into silence, protected from prying eyes and sharp tongues. In some households, pockets became hiding places not just for women, but for their secrets. There are court records from the 18th and 19th centuries of women accused of smuggling small goods through marketplaces: needles, buttons, ribbon, hidden in their petticoat pockets. Many of these cases involved women who had been caught doing what they believed they had to do: bring home something extra to survive. In other cases, they were framed or simply accused because they had the misfortune of being poor and female. It's important to note that not all women had the same kind of pockets. Wealth and social class mattered. A maidservant's pocket might be plain muslin or patched linen, her slit cut wide for quick access. A middle-class woman's pocket might be decorated with floral stitching hidden, yes, but still crafted with care. Some were even made with silk and finished seams, a sign that the pocket wasn't just practical, it was an extension of the woman's identity. In certain cultures, women's pockets were more than just personal, they were symbolic. In parts of Wales and rural Scotland, pockets were sometimes made as wedding gifts. A mother would sew a pocket for her daughter, lined with small charms or household items meant to bring luck and fertility. In Germany and the Netherlands, some girls had their names or initials stitched into the pocket lining, a quiet claim to personhood in a world that rarely recognized female autonomy. And then, during times of upheaval, pockets became places of protest. In the early 19th century, as women began to participate more actively in reform movements, whether for abolition, workers' rights, or early suffrage, some used their pockets to carry contraband literature. Small printed leaflets, illegal pamphlets, and handwritten petitions were folded into muslin and linen, pressed against the waist and kept there, silent and safe. Arresting a woman in the street for reading was one thing. Catching her with written words hidden under her dress required suspicion and boldness traits. Victorian decorum rarely encouraged in constables. Even young girls took part in the ritual. A 10-year-old might have a tiny cotton pocket sewn into her underskirt, sized just right for a peppermint lozenge or a borrowed pencil. This early training how to hide, how to hold, how to reach through fabric when no one's watching was a kind of domestic apprenticeship. Pockets were passed down through generations, sometimes literally. A grandmother's pocket might become a granddaughter's keepsake. There are museum archives filled with these relics now detached from their owners, faded and frayed. Some are labeled with names, others are anonymous. But if you examine them closely, you'll find stitches made by hands long gone, a piece of embroidery tucked into the curve of the fabric, a reinforced corner where something heavy must have been carried again and again. And yet, even as these pockets reveal so much, they also remain mysterious. The truly secret contents, the whispered words, the small hopes, the rules bent in silence, can never be fully known. What did it feel like to wear your entire world hidden beneath your clothes? To reach into folds of cotton and retrieve something only you knew was there? Chapter 3. The Disappearance of Pockets. A vanishing act in plain sight. The strange thing about women's pockets is not just that they once existed so independently. It's that they vanished almost completely. By the late 19th century, the sturdy, independent pocket that tied around the waist was beginning to disappear. This wasn't an accident. It was the result of shifting fashion, shifting power, and shifting ideas about a woman's place in society. For centuries, women's clothing had been layered and voluminous. Petticoats, aprons, underskirts, and gowns left plenty of hidden space for tied-on pockets to live discreetly between the layers. But as fashion changed, so did the structure of women's garments. Dresses became slimmer. Skirts grew narrower. The idea of a bulging bow beneath a woman's silhouette became unacceptable in polite society. Tailors began sewing garments that emphasized sleekness and curve over comfort or practicality. And with that, pockets were among the first things to go. But men's clothing? It gained more pockets than ever. The 19th century saw the introduction of interior jacket pockets, coin pockets, and special compartments for watches, keys, and pens. Men's trousers sprouted symmetrical slots as a standard, while women were increasingly expected to carry decorative handbags instead. Some fashion historians argue that this shift wasn't merely about aesthetics, it was ideological, as women began agitating more forcefully for rights, voting, working, owning property. Some believe the disappearance of functional pockets mirrored a deeper discomfort with women's autonomy. If you give a woman a pocket, you give her a private space. If you take it away, you make her more visible, more controlled. The handbag, beautiful as it may be, is carried, not worn. It is vulnerable to theft, interruption, and scrutiny. Unlike the pocket, it can't be kept secret. In a quiet but powerful way, fashion became part of the social conversation about who was allowed privacy and who wasn't. By the early 20th century, few women's garments included real pockets. There were decorative flaps, shallow seams, and false folds meant to imitate pockets, but no space to carry anything useful. A lipstick might fit, a calling card, perhaps. But gone were the days of keys, notebooks, or coins tied close to the body. It wasn't until the rise of women's workwear during the World Wars that pockets made a tentative return. In factories, farms, and hospitals, women needed to carry tools and equipment. Uniforms were designed with this, and mine trousers with belt loops, overalls with chest pouches, aprons with deep square pockets. These utilitarian pockets gave women new confidence. They were practical and empowering. But even then, the moment the wars ended and fashion returned to the hands of couturiers, the pockets retreated again. The post-war 1950s brought back the hourglass silhouette, emphasizing cinched waists and full skirts. Some pockets returned in disguise, hidden in the folds of pleats or along the seams of coats. But they were never meant to hold much. Certainly not independence, and so for most of the 20th century, women continued to ask, where are our pockets? Designers offered handbags, clutches, coin purses, but rarely the simple dignity of a sewn-in pocket. Today, the conversation is shifting again. Modern fashion increasingly includes practical pockets in women's clothing, thanks in large part to persistent demand. Some brands now advertise their pockets as a selling point. Yes, it has real pockets, women exclaim with delight. Social media is filled with videos of women celebrating a dress or pair of pants that finally lets them carry their phone. But the question remains, why did they have to fight so hard for them? In truth, the story of pockets is not just about fabric. It's about the quiet negotiation between privacy and exposure, between self-reliance and restriction. It's about how even the smallest things, like a stitched rectangle of linen, can shape a person's relationship to the world. And most of all, it's about remembering, every time a woman slips her hand into a real working pocket, she steps into a legacy, a history sewn with care, hidden beneath layers, passed down through generations, not always seen, but always felt. Thank you for joining us on this quiet little journey through history's forgotten fabric folds. If you enjoyed this gentle tale and you'd like more stories to fall asleep to, please consider giving this video a like, share it with someone who loves old things, soft voices, and hidden pockets. And don't forget to subscribe to the Quiet Boring Sleep channel, where history hums softly and bedtime is always a story away. Good night and sleep well.